test this topic.
All right, let's get into it. Today, we're looking at a huge moment in food tech. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration giving the safety green light to a totally new kind of salmon. And look, this isn't just about one company or one product. This could be the blueprint for the future of our food. So let's dive in and see exactly what the FDA found.
So, let's just cut right to the chase. Here's the final word from the FDA itself. After a review that took years, the agency came to the conclusion that this new food is just as safe as the salmon you'd buy at the store today. This isn't some far-off science fiction concept anymore. It's a regulatory reality. So what exactly is this stuff that just passed one of the most difficult safety reviews in the world?
That's the big question, right? What in the world is cultured salmon, and how did it manage to pass this incredible safety gauntlet? In this explainer, we're going to break it all down. We'll look at what this salmon is, how it's made, and then we'll walk right through the FDA's review step by step to see how regulators got so comfortable with a completely new way of making food.
Okay, first things first. Let's get really clear on what we're talking about here. This isn't a veggie burger that tastes like fish, and it's not from a traditional fish farm. This is something else entirely. This is cultured salmon. And yeah, you heard that right. It's made from actual animal cells. The idea is pretty wild. You take a tiny sample of cells from a real coho salmon, but instead of raising the whole fish, you just grow the cells themselves. And you do it in this super clean, totally controlled environment. Think less like a farm and more like a high-tech brewery.
So, how do you get from a handful of cells to something that looks and cooks like a piece of salmon? Well, the whole process is obviously pretty complex, but the FDA documents actually lay it out for us, almost like a recipe. So let's walk through it. It all kicks off with these things called mesenchymal cells. The reason they're so important is that they're basically master cells. They have this amazing natural ability to turn into all the different parts that make a fillet what it is, the muscle, the fat, all of it. They're pretty much the perfect biological building blocks for this whole process.
Okay, so here's the process in a nutshell. First, you isolate those perfect starter cells. Then, the company creates what's called a master cell bank. Honestly, you can just think of it like a sourdough starter. It's this pure, really stable source of cells they can use over and over again. From there, the cells go into a bioreactor, which is basically just a big, sterile steel tank, kind of like you'd see in a brewery. Inside, they're fed this nutrient-rich broth that helps them multiply, and once you have enough, you just harvest the cell material and give it a wash.
And now we get to the main event, the FDA's safety gauntlet. The company, Wildtype, had to prove to the regulators that every single step of that recipe we just went through was safe. And believe me, the FDA put this entire process under a massive microscope.
And look at this. This gives you a real sense of just how deep the FDA went. This is a quick peek at their hazard analysis. For every single step, from isolating the cells to growing them to harvesting them, the FDA made the company identify any potential problem, like contamination, and then prove they had a specific plan to manage it. Absolutely nothing was left to chance.
So what were they actually looking for? Well, this is the FDA's watch list. They call them adventitious agents and contaminants. They were checking for everything. You've got your nasty bacteria like Listeria and Salmonella, viruses, parasites that you might worry about in wild fish, and even heavy metals like mercury and lead. The whole goal was to prove that this super-controlled process could prevent any of these things from ever ending up in the food.
This is a big one, and a question the FDA spent a ton of time on. I mean, if you're not feeding a whole fish, what exactly are you feeding the cells to make them grow? The answer is, essentially, a high-tech nutrient soup. It's a carefully designed broth packed with all the things a cell needs to be happy and multiply: amino acids, vitamins, minerals, salts. And here's the really important part. The FDA pointed out that most of these ingredients are things we already eat every single day in other foods.
So what about the ingredients that aren't so common? Yeah, the FDA dug into those too. Take this one, for example. It's used to help deliver nutrients to the cells, but it's not something you see in food all the time. So the FDA did a deep dive. They figured out the absolute maximum amount someone might consume from the salmon and then compared that to a well-established, acceptable daily intake level. And the result? The amount in the product is more than 10 times lower than the safe daily limit. That is a massive safety margin and exactly what regulators want to see.
But you know, even with all these amazing controls, the FDA still wanted a final safety net, a fail-safe.
So Wildtype's process includes what's called a kill step. It's a gentle heat treatment that happens right after the salmon cells are harvested. Think of it as the ultimate quality control check, designed to wipe out any biological hazard that could have possibly survived the process.
So, how well does it work? The validation study showed it achieved a greater than 7.15 log reduction of listeria, which is a really tough foodborne bug. Okay, so what does that number even mean? Well, a 7 log reduction means if you started with, say, 10 million bacteria cells, this step would eliminate all of them except for maybe one. It's just an incredibly powerful safety measure.
So, we've established the process is safe. Check. But what about the food itself? How does this new cultured salmon actually stack up against the conventional salmon we all know?
When you look at the nutrition facts, one of the first things that really jumps out is the fat content. The cultured salmon, at least for now, has a lot less fat than conventional Coho salmon. This is probably because the company's process is really optimized for growing cells efficiently, not necessarily for developing fat just yet.
And you can see that trend continues for some other nutrients as well. But this brings us to a really important point from the FDA's review. The agency decided that for the product to be considered safe, it did not have to be a perfect nutritional clone of conventional salmon. Their one and only focus was on the question, is it safe to eat?
So after all these years of intense scrutiny, what's the big picture here? What should we really take away from this landmark safety review?
All right, let's boil it all down. First, this was not some rubber stamp approval. This was a super rigorous, multi-year review. Second, the production process itself is controlled and monitored from start to finish in a way that's just not possible with traditional fishing or farming. Third, the FDA's conclusion couldn't be clearer. The final product is as safe as conventional salmon. And fourth, this is a big one for consumers. Because it's made from real salmon cells, it will have the exact same allergen profile. If you're allergic to fish, you'll be allergic to this.
So what this FDA decision really does is create a blueprint. It lays down a clear regulatory path for other companies in this space. It answers that huge, critical question, is it safe? But it opens up a brand new one. With the science and safety now established, maybe the biggest challenge isn't in the lab anymore. Maybe the biggest hurdle is winning over hearts and minds and dinner plates. And that's a question that won't be answered by regulators, but by all of us. Thanks for joining the Explain.